Content is intended to provide accurate information, however, is not intended as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult a financial, legal, or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. Opinions expressed and provided are for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.
Welcome to Game Plan for Retirement with Chris Mcintire. Mcintire Retirement Services, Northwest Ohio's retirement planning resource.
And welcome into the program. This is your game plan for retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for a common sense approach to planning. He is Chris Mcintire, founder of Mcintire Retirement Services, providing us some guidance and insight and perspective on our money, on our finances, and what we need to be doing or paying attention to in order to make progress toward our important financial goals. And Chris, we always appreciate the approach that you take and the information that you share here on the program.
All right, Peter, it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Pleasure to be with everybody. And it's always nice to, add some nice information out here for the folks on a Saturday here. So hope everybody enjoys the show today.
Well, Chris, we always talk about topics that are of relevance and of importance and interest to proactive planners, but really bringing it all together today in the 10 steps to prepare for retirement. We are going to be covering the step-by-step process that someone can move through in order to feel more confident about making that transition into and then having a plan to make it through retirement. And each one of these steps, I think, are of value and importance to cover. So let's go ahead and get into it. And in just a moment, I do want to remind you, though, ladies and gentlemen, that if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, if you would like this list of the 10 steps to prepare for retirement, or if you would like to sit down with Chris and make sure that you have addressed each one of the items on this list, pick up the phone and give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. So, Chris, the first item on the list is something that a lot of successful savers, earners, and investors may not pay as much attention to as we need to during the time that we plan to walk away from the paycheck. And that is really examine and identify our budget, our expenses, and our spending.
Yes, and knowing your numbers, as we've referred to here in the past there, Peter, what is coming in on the Social Security, what is coming in off of the pension side for those of you that have those, and then how much money are you going to pull off of your investments to cover the shortfall to meet the outgoing numbers. Pretty simple math there. A lot of folks, don't always work those numbers. Some, we deal with a lot of engineers, obviously, who are very numbers oriented, and then we deal with other folks that are not numbers oriented, and anything fractional or with a decimal point gives them some certain amount of anxiety.
Yeah, well, it does boil down to a simple math equation. And really, the first three things here on the list, Chris, are that math equation that essentially means that our income has to be greater than our expenses. But in order to make sure that we have got the right equation and the right balance there, as we are preparing for retirement, we need to review our spending and define our budget. Now, budget can feel limiting. It can feel like the four-letter word of finance, so to speak. But as we're planning on not earning any more new active income, it's pretty important that we do understand and clearly define our typical spending habits and how much money month to month, year to year it takes to support the lifestyle that we're comfortable with and that we envision for retirement.
It's very common, Peter, for people to think, hey, I've worked my whole life. Now we're going to spend the rest of our lives spending. And I ran a budget. Now we've saved enough money and we can blow the budget out. And that's not necessarily the case. Obviously, when we have market conditions like we're having here in 2022 with a lot of volatility, a lot of sharp ups, a lot of sharps down, and then obviously the inflation word. It wouldn't be a radio show if we weren't talking about inflation. Certainly makes excess spending come to the front burner for sure. I'm a boater. We're up here in the boating world on Lake Erie, and I dread to see what the price of gas is going to be at marinas, and it will certainly curtail some of our, hey, we're going to go for a 3-hour cruise, kind of like the Gilligan's Island. That might be a half-hour cruise and we drop anchor at the beach.
Yeah, and so we've got to think about the costs, not only of our essentials of subsistence, of our bills, Chris, but of true lifestyle, because we don't plan on just sitting in the dark and in the corner in a basement watching TV for retirement. Today's retirement is active. We've got activities that we want to do. We've got goals and things that we want to accomplish. We've got day-to-day recreation, and then we've got those big bucket list kind of items and trips that we want to take. So clearly defining what that budget is, what the expenses are on a regular basis. Step one in the 10 steps to prepare for retirement. Again, if you'd like this full list, pick up the phone, give a call. If you're not going to have time to tune in for the full radio program today, a great resource to get in your hands to go over on your own time and really think about and reflect on your answers to these 10 important steps. Give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. So Chris, once we have really thought about and dove into the expenses, now we've got to make sure that the income is greater than the expenses and sufficient enough to cover it. Define your guaranteed sources of income is kind of the first step in that process.
As it always should be, Peter. And guaranteed income would be like Social Security coming in. That's guaranteed for as long as you're alive. If you've got pension payments, that's guaranteed for as long as you're alive. If you've got investments, say you're pulling $1,500 a month out of your mutual fund account, that's not necessarily guaranteed, right? That mutual fund account could suffer greatly from underperformance, if you will, and putting more pressure on, you have to take out more money than what the balance is, and a greater withdrawal rate. I'm sorry, trying to find my words there. We do a lot of guaranteed income, and that would be, the potential of adding a quality annuity with some income elements to it to complement your Social Security, to complement your pensions, or to create your own pension income if you didn't have any, so that, you were covering those basic expenses with guaranteed sources of income, so that when we experience times like we are in the stock market, it takes some of that emotion out of you saying, well, we can't do anything because, I don't want to pull any money out. The investments went down last month. Let's not go on vacation. Where if you had set guaranteed income coming in, it takes away all of that emotion, knowing that, hey, we've got money coming in guaranteed contractually for the rest of our life with our pension, Social Security, and we found a good quality annuity or two, depending on your situation, to alleviate that emotional distress that can happen when the stock, and especially the bond market this year as well, are not doing what we all would want them to do.
Yeah, and with the possibility of rising interest rates, we've talked about the pressures that can put on the traditional sources of more consistent income that are available in the market, and then the values themselves of bonds in the bond markets and bond funds can and probably will fluctuate as we see interest rates rise. And so we've really got to be cognizant of that and separate and clearly define what are the guaranteed sources and then what are the likely or probable or possible sources of income. But here in this initial equation, what we want to do, Chris, is we want to look at those guaranteed sources. What don't we necessarily have to generate from our assets? We've got the expenses on one side, we've got the guaranteed streams and sources of income, and then we've got the additional assets. But that math equation of the income needing to be greater than the expenses, if the guaranteed sources of income don't quite measure up to that level, there may be an income gap. And this is back of the napkin math here, but this is really the root of the retirement plan. When we talk about what's your retirement number, we've really got to figure out, identify, define, and then fill this income gap.
Sure, Peter. And, let's say as an example, you say back of the napkin math, that's a great analogy. And let's say we are dealing with somebody who's $2,000 a month short off of their income versus and maybe they have a $500,000 in a 401k account and they're $24,000 a year short. Okay. Well, they've got to pull out $24,000 out of that 401k account to, to generate the income that they need. And so, you think about that, that's pretty high math. That's what, almost 5.5%, or call it 5%. So that'd be 25,000. That might be an unsustainable withdrawal rate out of that bucket of money, especially given the market volatility that we're experiencing right now. If all of a sudden their $500,000 401k now becomes $400,000 and they have to pull $24,000 out of that, now all of a sudden they're pulling 6%, not 5%. And, that can certainly add stress. That would to my life if I was dealing with that situation personally. And how can we help folks offset that and get that, that structured guaranteed income that comes in. And then also we got to deal with the inflation side on income. I think a lot of the retirees that are listening to the show today have been very fortunate that inflation hasn't been the huge impact that it is right now. And, some of the highest inflation we've been dealing with in the last 40 years. So a lot of the baby boomers have had a very good run in the stock market with low inflation, but also, not having to pull additional dollars out to combat the inflation hit to their income side, Peter.
We are talking with Chris Mcintire, president and founder of Mcintire Retirement Services. And if you've got questions or concerns, if you would like this list of the 10 steps to prepare for retirement, or if you would like to sit down with Chris and the team from Mcintire Retirement Services and go over each one of the items on this list to make sure that you have a plan that has specifically addressed them, pick up the phone and give a call. They do offer the opportunity for that complimentary initial review, conversation, and financial and retirement planning strategy session. It's a detailed analysis of your accounts, your investments, and your plan for your financial future, making sure your dollars are working to help you achieve your important financial goals. Just give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. Now, Chris, when you talked about that cash flow rate, just for reference here, for about the last 35 years, really a generation or two of retirees have used what's been known as the 4% rule. It is a projection, an assumption that it should be reliable to take a 4% cash flow or income rate based on whatever lump sum that we have in the market. You're talking about a 5% or a 6% cash flow here under various scenarios. That's like 25% or 50% more income, more dollars that we're pulling out of those accounts than has been recommended as being probable or likely reliable. But even the 4% rule left margin for error and an acceptable rate of failure, room for doubt of whether or not we would run out of money by following the 4% rule for retirement income. So these first steps here, this math equation that we are moving through in this list of the 10 steps to prepare for retirement, are really trying to minimize that possibility mathematically wherever possible.
Yeah, Peter, you're right. There's big differences between, the theories and laws. For example, Newton's law isn't a theory, it's a law. The 4% rule was, designed in 1994 in a different interest rate environment, when you could probably walk into your local bank and get a CD paying 5% interest, or a 10-year U.S. government bond paying 5% interest. So, boy, that really makes the 4% rule easier to follow. In today's world, where interest rates are, even though they just recently have ticked up, we're a long ways away from being at normal. Some companies, you have to watch dividends that come off of your stocks as well. Our companies report, paying out dividends to clients. So, a lot of folks invest in growth stocks like the Amazons of the world, not necessarily dividend paying stocks as well. And, so when you go from the characteristics of a stock market and a bond market that, we're using 1994 logic in a 2022 world, certainly can present some issues there, because again, you use the word should, you should be able to pull 4% from your portfolio. That's what the, kind of the rule of thumb, if you will, because it is back of the napkin math right there. You got to create portfolios that generate at least 4%. If you're paying somebody to manage your money, then you also have to account for what you're paying them as well. And, we build a lot of income portfolios and like to explain all the different options that we have available for income. Do we want to do it out of money that we're trying to grow above the rate of inflation, or are we looking at, drawing the income out of contractually guaranteed instruments that are safe from market fluctuation, for example? And we do a lot of that,
and that
provides
is
peace of mind.
Yeah. And that is number 4 on this list of the 10 steps to prepare for retirement, Chris, is to formulate that written retirement income plan. That is going to take all of those options that are out there into account, into consideration, and help to select and then prioritize and put in the correct order the instruments that would be appropriate to fill whatever remaining income gap we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've been doing this for a long time, decades, and we know, what has been tried and true through recessions, through financial crises, and here we are, with a world, I don't want to use the word war out of context here, but obviously we have some conflicts that, many of us never dreamed were possible that we're dealing with now. And, that's going to threaten with inflation. The amount of food and whatnot that flows from Ukraine to the rest of the world and Russia obviously is significant in food prices. Some of these things we're not going to see until later on down the road after harvest seasons. BlackRock, we do a lot of business with BlackRock. They're one of the world's largest money managers, as you know, Peter. And recently on a webinar, they had a fact that said 34% of the world's wheat comes from Russia and Ukraine. What's going to happen to food prices when that isn't happening again?
Wow, that is a kind of scary statistic in reflection of everything that is going on. And those are the type of things, Chris, that we do need to be aware of and pay attention to, but we have to formulate the plan to give ourselves as much financial security as possible. And there are steps along the way that can help. That's what this list of the 10 steps to prepare for retirement are really all about, ladies and gentlemen. And if you would like a copy of this list, if you're just tuning in, you missed a few of the first ones, or if you're not going to have time to be tuned in for the entirety of the program, you'd like the full list to go over on your own time, pick up the phone, give a call. Chris Mcintire Retirement Services, happy to provide that for you. 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Even more valuable, the opportunity to go over each item on this list in perspective of your plan and making sure that your plan has addressed each one of these items. Chris offers to do that for radio show listeners and podcast viewers on a complimentary, no cost, no obligation basis. Just pick up the phone and give a call. 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Now, Chris, another item there that you help your clients work through and that you focus in on is Social Security. If we strategize, educate, and maximize our available Social Security, then it's going to minimize the stress, strain, and reliance on our personal assets to fill that income gap. And really, if we look at these first 5 items on the list, Chris, if these have not been focused in on, it's probably a strong indication that we've got an accumulation plan that is really based on growth of the market, but supported by our paycheck. And if we walk away from the paycheck, if we retire, then that plan may not be the most appropriate plan in the best interest of the needs that we'll have after or at that time.
Yeah, you're correct. And if you're listening today and you're 62 years old, you just recently retired, and you're saying, hey, I'm going to start getting my Social Security right now. I think it's the best piece. It's the best thing I can do. Or my buddies I play golf with said the same thing. That might not be the truest case there, or the best case scenario in your situation. You have to consider, what is your spouse going to get, assuming you're married or you have a significant other and they have pension income or Social Security income. Here in the state of Ohio, we deal with some people that were government employees, teachers, firemen, policemen that did not contribute into Social Security. So, if something happens to one of those spouses, they may not get any of that remaining Social Security. So we have to factor in other areas that aren't necessarily Social Security focused in when we make those decisions for folks, or help them make those decisions on what is the best filing strategy for them with Social Security, Peter.
Number 6 on the list here, Chris, understand your risk exposure. After we've gone through this math equation of helping to define the income plan, making sure that our sources of income meet or exceed our expenses, then we begin to look at the finer details of, okay, now let's troubleshoot. Now let's problem solve. Where is there potential risk to my ongoing financial well-being and security? Understand, identify your risk exposure is a step, Chris, that you really help turn over every stone, uncover every potential problem, pothole along the way, the obstacles. Market risk is a big one that we all think about. And certainly right now that's on the minds of a lot of investors. However, it's not the only risk that we are exposed to by any stretch of the imagination.
You're correct. We were speaking earlier of the withdrawal rate risk being one, the inflation risk. We haven't talked about healthcare risks that are out there, or long-term care risks. Many of these other factors will come into play here, Peter. And I think right now we'll just keep this at the market risk side of things here is, in your long-term exposure, because, 1 or 2 tough months in the market, say give a February or March, or a January, February of this year, certainly a lot more volatility than we had seen in the past year. That doesn't necessarily mean that your overall long-term risk tolerance has changed. It just didn't feel good when you opened your statement and looked at it. Bond investors have certainly taken a hit this year as the Federal Reserve has begun this interest rate increase and is threatening to do it even at a faster pace to help quell inflation. The other side of that is the recessionary risk. Are they going to, is the economy going to slow down so much right now that we actually take a couple of steps backwards for a short time to help get prices to go down? You could look at the housing market right now. We have a lot of supply chain issues that have not been fixed from the pandemic. So some of these things are still carrying forward, Peter. So, they all just don't go away because COVID cases temporarily went down or maybe permanently went down. I have no idea what they're going to do. But it feels much more normal out there now than it has previously from the pandemic side of things. Take Florida, for example. Real estate prices are, off the charts there. There's no demand, no supply to meet the demand. All right. That adds to the inflationary risk. If you can find the materials. My buddy remodeled his bathroom and they've been waiting 7 months for the bathtubs,
Wow.
Or the shower inserts, whatever you want to call them. 7 months.
Yeah. Some of those, Chris, risks that we probably wouldn't have even thought of or considered maybe 3 or 5 years ago, but real life scenarios. And as we are uncovering, examining, and understanding our risk exposure, sometimes we have to throw in there, what about the unexpected? What about those black swan events? What about some of those things that are unpredictably outside of our control? How do we cope? Where's our reserve? Where is our offset? So identifying what's needed for income, what's left over for additional security, discretionary assets, part of the planning process. And then, Chris, we obviously want to keep as much of our money as possible. And as we move through this list of the 10 steps to prepare for retirement, number 7 on the list, calculate taxes. Chris, sometimes we have a hard time calculating what we owe from last year. We just hand it off to accountant. Is the amount of tax we'll owe over our lifetime or into our retirement future quantifiable? Can we crunch these numbers?
We can give it a best guess, I guess, because we don't know what the powers in Washington will do to our taxes, or even the state, if you will. I think the federal one is the biggest one that we all pay more attention to because it's bigger. And you could say, hey, I'm going into retirement. We're going to live off of $60,000 a year in income. Some of that includes Social Security, withdrawals from our investments, pensions. That's not a huge taxable event. What is going to trip you up is at age 72, when you have to start taking those required minimum distributions out. For those of you that don't need IRA income in your retirement, that can trip you up, put you in a higher income tax bracket. Or if you make those, a large purchase, for example, we were just talking about Florida real estate. So somebody wants to buy a condo on Fort Myers Beach and they say, look, I don't want any debt. I'm going to take the tax hit. We're going to pull $150,000 out of the IRA to make a deposit on this condominium that we always wanted. Okay. Well, that might drive up your Medicare premium expenses because you fell into some other loopholes, and jeopardize some other issues that you may have as well, too.
Yeah, all of these pieces of the puzzle fit together, so to speak, ladies and gentlemen, and certainly impact one another for your full financial and retirement picture. You've got to consider each one of these aspects individually, but how they fit into the next piece, how they will have consequences or impacts on the total picture. And again, if you'd like to have this list to go over on your own time, or even more valuable, if you'd like to sit down with a qualified, experienced set of eyes, professional, Chris Mcintire is here to help and assist, not only providing the information and education, not only providing you the opportunity to get this list on your own, but to sit down and review your specific plan to make sure it addresses all of these aspects of planning, these 10 steps to prepare for retirement that we are reviewing today. Give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. Chris, this next one on the list, consolidate like qualified accounts. Is this because sometimes retirement accounts get out of sight, out of mind, and while that can somewhat be a benefit while we're working and earning money and contributing to certain accounts, leaving orphaned accounts behind can sometimes mean they're neglected, not getting the attention that they need, or that we lose track of them?
Yeah, certainly could be. And by qualified folks, Peter means like a 401k, an IRA, a 403b, those retirement type plans that are qualified for special tax treatment. Yeah, certainly we do help people kind of clean them up from time to time and say, look, you got, 4 old 401ks out here, maybe we can merge 2 or 3 of them together and we can take another one here, create a safe strategy, a number of different things. There's nothing wrong with having a couple of different types of retirement accounts that you may have, because you might have a growth portfolio invested in stocks and whatnot. And then you may have some safe money sitting over here in a different pile that you can't find on Wall Street. That's very common. You might have a Roth IRA that you're taking money from a regular IRA and moving that over. That's fine as well. But, I think to start the year off here, we had one of our companies we do a fair amount of business with, ran a kind of an incentive, and it helped us clean some accounts up for clients that gave them an opportunity to kind of merge things together that, like you said, it kind of been sitting out there. I don't want to call them stagnant, but, we're looking for other opportunities. And this was a good time to kind of take advantage of those opportunities.
And then, Chris, number 9 on this list of the top 10 things to prepare for retirement, the 10 steps to prepare for retirement. You've been mentioning it throughout the course of the program because it is a concern of the day. Consider inflation. However, I would say, Chris, that even in times where it is not news headlines, inflation never goes away. And unfortunately, a lot of the traditional retirement projections that we see sort of ignore inflation as actually being a factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And, inflation is going to be here on our front screen, front radar, front burner, if you will, definitely for the foreseeable future. And, we're going into a midterm election, and we're probably going to hear about it very, very often in a lot of these campaign ads and whatnot. But, here's the threat of inflation, Peter. inflation is running at 7%, and if it was going to do that for 5 years, we need 50% more income to do the same things we're doing today. How are you going to generate 50% more income? Social Security probably isn't going to keep pace with that. Many pensions don't have cost of living adjustments as well. Are you going to have to pull more money off of a portfolio that might be under some sort of duress because of, the impact of inflation on stock and bond prices as well? So certainly something that must be considered, and to look at how do we tame this inflationary beast, or to keep up with the rate of inflation on the income side.
Well, we have been moving through the 10 steps to prepare for retirement, finally reviewing and updating your legal documents. If this is something that has been ignored, certainly as you are looking at your outlook for retirement, a great time to take this last important step in the process. Again, if you missed any portion of the program today, would like this complete list to go over on your own time, pick up the phone, give Mcintire Retirement Services a call, 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Or better yet, if you would like to sit down with an experienced, qualified professional, Chris Mcintire, your resource here on the program, does offer you, ladies and gentlemen, the opportunity for a complimentary, no cost, no obligation initial conversation, a review, a financial and retirement planning strategy session, and investment analysis. Pick up the phone and give a call if you would like to take advantage of that offer. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. Great to request the list ahead of time, then come in and discuss each bullet point on the list, each of the important 10 steps to prepare for retirement with Chris. And Chris, we always appreciate your guidance here on the program, and today talking with us about these 10 important steps to prepare for retirement.
Well, thanks, Peter. Good to be with everybody. Stay safe out there and pray for peace.
Visit McIntireRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris Mcintire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.
Any comments regarding safe and secure investments and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Indexed or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract.